Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today, my guest is David Stevenson. David has been working in Indigenous social wellness for over 25 years, but he's also the CEO of the Moosehide Campaign. Do you know what the Moosehide Campaign is? It's pretty amazing. It affects everybody in Canada, and hopefully you can get involved too. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi, David. It's so good to see you.
Lovely to see you, Tamara. Thanks for having me on.
I'm really excited about this conversation. And, I'm going to assume that maybe a lot of people listening have no idea what the Moosehide Campaign is. So before I get into you and your role, maybe we can start with tell us about the Moosehide Campaign.
Sure. So thanks for asking. So the Moosehide Campaign is a campaign that started along the Highway of Tears in 2011 by Paul and Raven Lacerte. And it's a campaign that is focused on raising awareness against violence against Indigenous women and children at first. That's initially how it started. And it's now moved on to be a campaign that is focused on raising awareness and engaging action from all Canadians against violence against all women and children in Canada. So, of course, that was 2011. A lot has happened since then. The Me Too movement, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. So this issue has become a much more broadly understood issue. It started off as a small grassroots movement. Paul and Raven were out hunting. They actually, their traditional territory is Carrier. They're Carrier from the Carrier Nation. And of course now the Highway of Tears, Highway 16, cuts right across their traditional hunting grounds. They were out one morning and got a moose, as they have done and their generations have done before them in the same area. But they were inspired that morning to take the hide of the moose and to cut it up into little squares. And I'm holding one up now for those who are watching. Little squares and hand them out to men in their communities. And down here in Victoria, where I am, and they actually took the squares, cut them up, and then wrote out on index cards. If you wear this hide, you promise to love, respect, and protect the women and children in your life, to never do harm, and to work with other men to bring awareness and understanding of the impact of this issue. That's when it started off with a focus on Indigenous women and children, and we are still anchored there. But of course, we now see the campaign as reaching out and trying to better the situation for all women and children in Canada. And it was anchored at first really on engaging men and boys, but we remain there, but it's also reaching out to all Canadians to bring this message out and to bring the impact of the campaign out. So that's the Moosehide, the actual Moosehide itself. There was also in the early days a small gathering of men that we did here in Victoria. And so this year is our 11th year of doing that gathering. And of course, with the pandemic, we went online. And so that gathering was really what we did is it was kind of like a men's gathering a bit, in the sense in the early days where we invited men to come to gather, and we did a little march down to the BC legislature at that time and basically said, we're here to say that this is not a blame and shame situation or anything like that, but that men and boys need to become much more aware and engaged in this issue, to understand our role and to reclaim healthy roles, healthy masculinity and traditional roles from Indigenous perspective, maybe sort of a traditional warriorship role that is based upon respect, love, protection, and acting in a way that's aligned with good natural values of care and protection. So now that, of course, has grown to a big movement. This year we have just about 350,000 people registered to watch the online event. It's gone online. We have about 40,000 people who have said they're going to fast with us during the day too. So one of the things we've done is always had a fast. And we've challenged men and boys, but we've invited all Canadians to be part of this fast. Sunrise to sunset, and do it in a healthy way. And I can talk a bit more about that if you want. But yeah, that's basically the campaign.
Yeah, so it's okay. There's a lot there for me, and I mean, I live in British Columbia, and I worked in news for a long time. I'm very familiar with the Highway of Tears. In fact, I just reread the book that was written about the Highway of Tears and each of the women and their stories. And I just, as someone who, lives here, I always think like, gosh, do people really care? You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean about the Moosehide campaign. I mean about just in general about Indigenous women who go missing, who are still missing after all these years. And I love how you talked about, men and boys and because there are fathers and uncles and brothers who have had their loved ones go missing and murdered. And what do you, I noticed you're wearing the Moosehide Square, and I've seen it many, many times and not known what it was. I do obviously know now, but I didn't know what it was. And is wearing that square to maybe have people say, right? Like, what is that? And then you can tell them what it is about, right? It's a conversation starter, I guess, for lack of a better, because I'm curious as to, how do we not forget all these women? How do we work together to, I don't know what it is, demand answers, demand action, and I feel like we are moving in the right direction. But in a lot of ways, we have a lot of work to do, don't we?
Yeah. Absolutely. There is maybe to back up to a couple of steps and just say that as a man growing up in this society, I did not fully understand just what it means for me to get up at 12 o'clock at night and decide to go down to the local 7-Eleven or something like that. Whereas for women, that's just not on. Or walking in an empty parking lot in the evening and stuff like that. Most guys don't understand what it means to be kind of at risk by your gender, and particularly for Indigenous women who are 12 times more likely to be murdered or go missing in this country. So they're at risk by being in this country in a way that is not necessary. So there's a lot in your question, because
I know. Sorry about that. It was like it's a very big topic, right, yeah. David? And it's so hard to focus it because, yeah. But you're right. I like what you just said there, because every woman listening right now can relate to what you just said.
Right. And it says something that I didn't know that, and a lot of men don't have a sense of that. And yet the people I most love and most want to have good, safe lives, are women and my daughters. And, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't even know that. And so it's interesting. There's different points on which different men come to realize what this means. And I was sitting with, a senior government official one time and saying, yeah, and one of the stats we're just sort of getting our minds around and trying to do, we've decided to do some work in the post-secondary sector. And that's because 1 in every 3 women who go through post-secondary will be either sexually or physically assaulted before they finish their post-secondary education. And his jaws sort of dropped a bit, and he goes, well, I've got 2 daughters in post-secondary. And I said, yeah, so chances are they're at risk on some level here. And so I think men there's a couple of angles at which we want to really engage men. And of course, we want to engage all Canadians from all cultures and all along the gender continuum. Absolutely, our two-spirited people in Canada and the gender diverse people suffer needlessly from this kind of racism and prejudice, etc. But 2 things for men is to understand that it's our role, I think, if not a role, at least a set of values that we would probably, to be healthy in this culture, we need to have a sense of respect. And maybe it's not protect, because some women will say, I don't need protection. Okay, fair enough. But certainly for our daughters, aunties, for them to be at risk is something that we can do something about by holding ourselves and each other collectively accountable to create a culture of healthy masculinity built in love and respect. And I really believe from this years of working in this, that men want to get there, that men generally want to do that, but they haven't been taught, or there hasn't really been a moment where we've said to each other, we need to up our game here collectively. So part of the campaign is just to shine a light into, colonization and domestic violence both require us to not talk about it for it to thrive. It thrives in the darkness. So we think of the moose hide pin as shining a light into that darkness. Yep, people will walk up and go, wow, it's really Canadiana too. What, a piece of moose hide. You can't ask for anything more Canadiana than that. People come up and go, well, what is that? And you go, well, thanks for asking. It's a square of moose hide. I'm standing up against violence towards women and children. It's not love. It's not respect. And I think we can change that. And I, believe it's enough conversation.
What are your thoughts on, I have seen people in government wearing the square, and I find it interesting because when it comes to policy and change, they are the people that can create that policy and change. So when somebody is wearing a pin, whether it be a moose hide pin or whatever pin it may be, and you're in government, I worry sometimes that it sends a message like, oh, we do care, but, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to slag anybody here, but it's, if you're going to walk the walk, you got to talk the talk too. And, we can only do so much awareness.
That's right. Yeah.
Before we have to step up and go, okay, enough is enough. And like you've been doing this work for a very long time. I've been volunteering with some different places in the downtown east side. And, but I'm new to this. I'm not, I'm very new to it. But my observation of it is that we have a long way to go. It does not appear to be getting better. It appears to be getting worse. And so, all we can really do is look to the people who are in charge of these policies and change. So what can we do as regular citizens to sort of, put our foot down and say, we need to change this now. Women are not safe. Indigenous women are not safe in this country. We're hearing it, but are we changing it?
Mm-hmm. And a great question, and that's the issue. So I love the way you set that up, because there are really good people. I worked in government. There's lots of good people in government. But it does speak to these institutions. Government institutions were built on a certain set of principles and values that they carried forward to make the society, and they play a role in changing this. Government does need to play a role as an institution. So it's systematic racism that we're dealing with on that level, and systematic, misogyny and whatever. These are very big, complex issues. But the thing about it is government is just a bunch of people at the end of the day making decisions, right? And so I think it's really important that we have lost in the Western world something that, we consider this an Indigenous innovation or Indigenous medicine for the benefit of all Canadians. And one of the things we'd like to, put into this space is that, it was interesting. I got asked yesterday in a different interview about men who are wearing the moose hide but are not healthy men and actually being, identified as potential perpetrators. And, so it was really important to say two things. First of all, this is not an opportunity to virtue signal. We're not in a position where say, hey, I wear the moose hide pin, therefore I'm a good guy. It is not a badge of honor. It's an acknowledgement that we are behind the eight ball on this issue, that we have a conversation, that we are out of balance, full stop, as a society. And that is impacting women and children in particular in ways that are not necessary. The thing about it, it's completely preventable. We don't need to find an mRNA vaccine for this. We need to find the willpower to do it collectively. And so your point about, the governments is really important, because there is something that Indigenous communities have held really strongly, and I think the Western world tries to hold from time to time and fumbles, is that leadership isn't about wielding power. And, you can't wield power in a healthy way without first, having, you can't without first managing your own pain and own humanness. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to wield authority in a good way. And the other thing is that political leadership, we hope, would translate into a high standard of moral leadership. A sense that if you're in that position that you come hell or high water, you're going to do what you can to make this country better for your daughters and your aunties and your uncles. Full stop. And if that translates into somebody in some area not being happy about, that being a priority over this priority, that's a decision. That's not a necessity. We can make that decision, and political leaders can make that decision. We hope they do, because they're not all doing that. They're not all saying, oh, this is really important and I'm going to get behind this and forward it. And some are, so it's an important piece of, I think it's a societal level challenge that we're trying to address for sure. We have a vision of 1 million Canadians fasting together in ceremony and gifting out 10 million moose hide pins. And part of the idea is that vision is to say, if we do, and I believe we can get 1 million Canadians to say, let's stop, take a day and say, this isn't just a policy discussion or a debate or academic. This is a time to say, I'm going to deepen into my personal core values and the collective core values that this country should hold and should act on. And yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable for a day, but fasting as being part of all religions and cultures, and big social changes happened. You think of Gandhi and others around fasting. So we think about the fast as a way for us to say this is a time where we're going to step outside of the day-to-day push and shove of political priorities or whatever. And we're going to stand back and go, transcends that, or it's deeper than that. This is a moment when we can say, we can change this country. We can change our communities, but it's going to take some, concerted effort and commitment. So it's a long road, like reconciliation, gender-based violence. These are long roads. There's no policy we're going to write that's going to end the dark side of human nature. We're going to have to work at it together.
Yeah, and I agree totally. I have so many things racing through my head right now. I find sometimes, or I found, working in news, that people just tune out when they hear certain things. And, that'll never be me. I don't need to worry about the opioid crisis because
right.
I don't know anybody that does drugs. I don't need to worry about murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls because, that's not me. I don't need to worry about that. It sounds flippant to say that, but it's actually the truth. I've seen it firsthand with people. And I've seen it in the way that news is structured and what will hold the audience longest. And do you know what I mean? So these are all really important things because we don't like to look at things that are uncomfortable. We don't like to talk about things that are uncomfortable. And so I'm trying to come at it from a way of how do we bring those people in? Because you're right, we need everybody to stand up and say, enough. This is enough. And I'm not sure that people can relate to something that seems so foreign to them. But you started off this conversation by saying, I don't think twice about going out at midnight to go get, a soda or whatever it might be. Okay, you just said something that every single woman can relate to.
Yeah, and
because I do not feel safe walking in my neighborhood at dark,
right.
and I just don't, and I never have, and I live in a safe neighborhood, I think, but do you know what I mean? So I'm trying to figure out, how do we change the conversation so that you and I aren't sitting here 10 years from now having another conversation about how things aren't changing? Do you know? And I know this is the $1 million question, isn't it?
Sure it is.
Really?
And it's, I spend a lot of time in Indigenous child welfare. Same question there. How do we stop all the kids from being... So I have a couple of responses that help me think about this and think my way through this. And one is that, we have a real focus on the K-12 system. We're really interested in getting young men and boys. we have a bit of work to do as men in this sense that most men I know did not go through any formal rite of passage, didn't go through any formal process that said, you're a man now, and here's some rules of the road. Here's what's in scope and here's without a scope, right? So we're not being raised in a culture, and most cultures would have had at some point some kind, whether it's a bar mitzvah or rite of passage or whatever, that sort of said, okay, you're transitioning out. So I think men need to think about that. I think we need to stand back and go, okay, I need to build in some of that eldership and some of that learning back into my life, my family, my network, and my kids. And part of that is always being some kind of understanding of their relationship to love, respect females, and understand there is a lot of Indigenous communities. I turn to Indigenous communities broadly across the globe. Men are often real caretakers of young babies, and they're also fierce warriors at the same time. Those are not two things. We're not talking about men getting soft and sort of like giving up the, role of being, we can also be all those things and be loving and caring and be kind and call each other out. And when I say call each other out, I'm not talking about a blame and shame thing. I think a lot of men really have not been guided very well or at all. And I don't blame anybody for that. I don't know what to say. So all of that to translate into, big question. Let's think about what are the small steps we can take to create a healthy culture of masculinity. And so Moose Hide is an opportunity. It's not everything, but it's an opportunity to say, oh, what's that? Well, it's a piece of moose hide. I'm standing up against violence towards women and children. Oh, well, that's something over there. Oh, but by the way, if you've got any daughters, you should think twice about this. So if you don't have a mother, a daughter, no aunties, no grandma, no sisters, no female neighbors, you're fine. But if you've got any of those in your life, you need to think twice.
And most people have many of those.
Exactly. Yes. At least a mother,
Yes, yes.
So
it's a fascinating conversation. And just before we continue, David, when we have our guests on, we like to thank them. And we like to thank them by asking them to choose a Canadian nonprofit. And we give $500 in your name to that nonprofit. You chose the Moose Hide campaign, thank goodness. And so we will be giving the Moose Hide campaign $500 for you spending your time here with us. And we really appreciate it because these are important conversations, and especially for men and the boys that we're raising. And you touched on something really important there, and we have these, and it's a colonial way of being, right? Women do this, men do this, women say this, men say this, and it's and that's how we raise our boys. I think it's changing, but maybe that's just my circle of friends. I don't know. I hope it's changing, but again, you and I will watch the news and we'll see stories that say maybe it's not changing at all. So this is a silly question, and I'm actually embarrassed to ask you, can only men wear the moose hide pin?
Great question, because it's and this is on us. We have to get the message out better. But absolutely not. Everybody is invited and needs to be part of this conversation. Men cannot hold this conversation in a vacuum. We need women to be right at the center saying, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that doesn't. Oh, here's what I think. So it's a conversation and we offer and invite all Canadians from all genders, all cultures, all backgrounds, all, new Canadians, the oldest Canadians we can find, which are, Indigenous people, all Canadians and from coast to coast to be part of the conversation. And, as you certainly know through being a journalist, that the right message for the right people at the right time can have a profound impact. And so, we know that one pin, we've had about 5 years of impact measurement following the campaign. And they're comfortable to say that for every pin we've generated, there's been 5 conversations. And for every pin that has been worn, by people actually wore them, because some people get them, wear them 3 days and don't. But if people wear them, often they, under our impact measurement word, they'll get 20 to 40 conversations. So at 3 million, at least 15 million conversations have happened, if not more. And we're in over 25,000. We're well over 3,000 now. Not 25,000, 2,500. Probably well over 3,000 communities and organizations across Canada now do something on Moose Hide Campaign Day. Now we actually have a bunch of cities coming on. We have the federal government who actually do the campaign within the federal government, BC government within the ranks of the BC government and other governments, municipal governments now, churches, lots of First Nations communities are all doing some kind of thing. And we just say, take the camp and tell us, take the moose hides, make them yourself, share the message, be creative with it, do what you can to just create this. It's not our, from a traditional perspective, it's a land medicine, the moose skin. And when you give it away, you give it away. It's not ours to own, or we steward the idea of it, but it really belongs to the land, and we're sort of we're just helping it get to its destination, which hopefully acts as a bit of a medicine like we like to say, a medicine for a social illness that's impacting all Canadians. It's impacting us partly because we don't talk about it, or if we do, we don't talk about it with any skill or real comfort or understanding. So one of the things we do on Moose Hide Campaign Day, which I'm going to do a little, can I do a little 2-minute commercial about Moose Hide Campaign Day?
Of course.
Is to invite everybody to Moose Hide Campaign Day. Everybody's invited. You can go to our website and register, and there's a plenary from about 8:30 till 9:45, and then a little break, and there's live interactive workshops for about an hour and a half. The workshops are about an hour and a half. And we invite everybody to sign up for a workshop. And the workshops are, again, they're live, they're interactive, and they're with mostly Indigenous, either knowledge keepers, not all of them are Indigenous, there's different folks, but knowledge keepers or elders, and talking about traditional roles of men, healthy life, healthy balance from an Indigenous perspective. And just some skill sets to say, okay, this is a conversation that I don't really know how to have, or I don't feel safe in. So this is a bit of skill building. Collectively as a nation, we need to build the skills to be able to say, yeah, we're going to talk about this in a way that's respectful and kind and sort of a lot of people, as you know, just don't have a clue how to be that. And it's not just, like to say things off the cuff that are harmful, and the concept of microaggressions has come that people are very unconscious about this. It's about like one thing I'll say that I've sort of used as a bit of a metaphor was, how drunk driving was in the 70s and 80s. So you could get drunk and drive and the police would pull you over. I actually had this experience, I'm going to admit, when I was a young guy. I had a few drinks and I was driving home and a police officer pulled me over and said, "Young man, have you been drinking?" And I'm sitting there beside my friend and he leans over and we both go, "Yes, we have." This was on the prairies in the late 70s, early 80s when I was only 4 years old, I think, at the time. And he said, "Then you boys drive straight home." And about 2 years after that was when the whole thing around drunk driving came. Is like, they don't say drive straight home. They pull you out of the car, they take your license, they give you, like, there was this line in the sand, and there used to be this gray zone, and that's where I think domestic and gender-based harm lives, as does reconciliation, in the gray zone. It's like, well, it's debatable whether, there's been people who still say it's debatable whether residential schools were actually a harmful thing. I mean, there's Canadian politicians who said that.
Yes.
And it's like,
yes.
Okay, I just think of that as, wow, do we have a long way to go?
We do. And, as somebody who's spent time on a crisis line for violence against women, I can say that it is everywhere. And it is happening in homes where, there are people and violence comes in very many different forms. And also it's not spoken about, and women are terrified to come forward for many reasons. And we do have a long way to go. But you know what, David, the work you're doing is really incredible. And, I'm glad to know that I can now go online and get a moose hide square, because I wanted to ask you, and I felt silly asking you if women can wear it too, because I didn't know. So I'm glad you cleared that up for me. And you're right about the conversation, right? If we if we don't hide and we talk about this and we demand action, demand answers. And don't you think that a big part of it is educating ourselves, like taking the time to read about the Highway of Tears? Like if you are living in this country and you don't know about the Highway of Tears, it's time to read about the Highway of Tears. Because I promise, once you know, you will never not care again. You will demand answers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's so, thank you for saying that. That education piece is huge, because I think we are, there's a scale of learning. There's unconscious incompetence, consciously incompetent at something, and then I think consciously competent or something. I forgot it. It's a way of thinking about it. So we don't even know that we don't know about this tragedy and this, people call it the shadow pandemic. And of course, during the pandemic, it went way up. Economic stress, isolation drove these numbers up. And so, education, that's why it's so important for us to reach out to our young boys. On Moosehide Campaign Day, we'll actually have a K-12 stream going on. And it's actually a live stream. So we'll have the main live stream and then a K-12 live stream and then workshops for the young folks. And it gives me a lot of hope. We give out, literally 15,000 pins a day right now. Across Canada, and when people order the pins, they have an opportunity to go online. You order a pin, and there's a little comment box, and we ask people, so what are you doing? We get tons of messages from young Canadians, young First Nations communities all across Canada, saying stuff like, "I'm ordering." I'll give you a story, just a quick one. Grade 4 school in Yellowknife. They find out about it. They go, "Oh, this is really good." Of course, Yellowknife has a high Indigenous population. There are issues of violence for sure in those local communities. So the grade 4 kids say, "Well, we need to take this home and we need to get it out." So now they're driving around. They've done an art project and they're driving around to all of the other schools, handing out moose hides and going, "You need to talk about this in your schools, in your families."
Good for them.
And they just do it. And there's
good for them.
Of stuff like that going on. And that's what we want. We don't know. We probably literally know 1% of actually what happens with the Moosehide Campaign pins and the campaign itself. And that's the way it should be. It belongs to the people. Take it and make it
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, the Moosehide campaign website is moosehidecampaign.ca. And you can also find them on Instagram. It is moose_hide_campaign. David, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much. And I will be going online right after this to get my pin. So thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Tamara. Awesome to be with you. And please join us on May 12th, everybody. Please come and watch and be part of the day.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.